savor, like my hometown that I favor. That old place down the long road that I'm traveling to. There's the jokes at the barber, told by Cleve from the hardware, about the stories that always make the news. Our town, wherever I may roam, I'll always have a place that I call home. Our town, it's very plain to see, there'll always be a part of you in me.
The 5 interconnecting lakes in the heart of the North American continent are simply called the Great Lakes. The name is apt, for no other adjective describes the expanse of the region or the activity on this, the greatest body of freshwater in the world. The cities, towns, and villages located along the thousands of miles of Canada's fourth seacoast are rich in commerce, industry, history, and romance. I'm Barry Penhale, in what has often been described as the prettiest town in Canada. The influence of Lake Huron has given this community a distinctive marine heritage. Tall ships, a harbor of refuge, and massive salt beds are but part of the story of the historic Port of Goderich. Here, overlooking the Maitland River where it flows into Lake Huron, was once the location of Chippewa Indian encampments. Later, at this site, a monument was erected to mark the tombs of the brothers Robert and William Dunlop. William Tiger Dunlop, the fiery, red-headed Scot, was probably one of the most colorful and dynamic characters of early Canadian history. This remarkable man is recognized today as the founder of Goderich. His career began in the British military, where as a young surgeon he took part in one of the bloodiest battles of the War of 1812, the Battle of Fort Erie. In pursuits of journalism, he later traveled to India, where an encounter with a species of the jungle earned him the nickname Tiger. Dunlop's achievements in literary and social circles brought him to the attention of John Galt. Galt, a lawyer of literary bent, had founded what was to become the greatest colonization scheme in the history of this country. The Canada Company, as it was called, would purchase crown and clergy reserves in the Huron tract, survey and develop the land, and resell it to settlers. Galt gave Dunlop the auspicious title Warden of the Woods and Forests. Dunlop's early exploration along the shores of Lake Huron led him to this place. Conditions here would prove ideal for a harbor facility that would steadily grow and prosper. This beacon, built in 1847 on Lighthouse Point, has guided ships to the refuge of the harbor for over a century. It has also witnessed the evolution of Great Lakes shipping. From the era of topsail schooners, three-masters, and steamships, the harbor has seen an increasing tonnage of bulk cargo as the young country developed. Grain, coal, and ore were being shipped on Lake Huron. Ropes, cables, spars, and acres of canvas lay on the wharves. The smell of tar, sawdust, and damp lumber hovered over the waterfront, which virtually became a forest of masts interwoven with halyards and rigging. Goderich was already a thriving Lakeport and county town when a company was formed in the 1890s to drill for oil. Oil had been discovered earlier, further south in Lambton County, and the taste of black gold was in the air. Samuel Platt persevered in his efforts, and at the 1,000-foot level unexpectedly struck the purest brine known, the first salt well on the North American continent. Soon, Goderich was a salt town, processing 100 barrels of salt a day. The names of Gooding, Deschamps, and Big Mac McDonald are tied with the early story of the town. Main offices and sheds for the Canada Company formed a good section of the buildings. Prior to 1828, anyone coming to settle in Huron County came in through the harbor. A year later, Galt commissioned a road to be opened through the track, and with this, the town's population grew. The community thrived in its industries as plans were underway to lay out the commercial center on top of the bluff, 130 feet above the waterfront. It is sometimes recounted that the unique town plan, incorporating an octagon with main roads leading into the town square, was originally conceived in England and intended for Guelph. Allegedly, the plans during shipment were interchanged, with the result that Goderich inherited one of the most interesting town layouts in the country. Among the half-dozen new industries which contributed to Goderich's economy at the turn of the century, the largest was the Good Roads Machinery Company, which later became Champion Road Machinery. The company, thriving to this day, ships its various products worldwide. Twentieth-century Goderich is a bustling town, steeped in the traditions of Huron County. From the days of the Canada Company, John Galt, and Tiger Dunlop, it has evolved into a closely knit community proud of its past. I was introduced to Goderich in grand style by Mayor Eileen Palmer and Judge Carter. The pride they share in their town is understandable, for the Port of Goderich offers to residents and visitors alike many reminders of this early settlement of Upper Canada. As we traveled along West Street into the square, I was impressed with the historic landmarks, originally constructed in the last century. Erected in 1895, the Hotel Bedford occupies a prominent position on the square. Situated in the park-like setting at the hub of the octagon is the Huron County Courthouse. Here also is a reminder of those who fought for the country's freedom in both wars. The town square itself is truly a remarkable example of the treasures of Canada's architectural heritage. With a board of trade formed in 1875, the early merchants of the town conducted the majority of commerce with Detroit, since the connection by water was the most efficient. During the early 1900s, a simple sign hung from an upstairs studio, located at the corner of Montreal Street and the square. The sign read, R.R. Sallows, Photographer. Reuben Sallows earned an international reputation as a rural artist with a camera. Unorthodox and revolutionary for his time, his photographs, cherished to this day, are clearly the most sensitive portrayal of life at the turn of the century ever captured by one camera, one man. The 8 streets, each 99 feet wide, which radiate from the square like the spokes of a wagon wheel, showcase a beautiful array of architecture in the vernacular style. Regency, neoclassic, Georgian, and Victorian designs are evident throughout the community. The town has a genteel quality, reminiscent of its maritime heritage. Situated on North Street is this cluster of buildings that not only preserves the history of Huron County, but also commemorates a man whose interpretation of the early life of the region is upheld as an example to those associated with museums throughout the country. J. Herbert Neal founded this institution, and his dream and innovation were recounted to me by those who knew him. Friedel Nance devoted over 20 years to helping Neal fulfill his dream.
I like really working for the museum. That's my second home, I always say. You could use all kinds of stuff. I had an old washing machine at home. I wanted to throw it out. No, he said, I can use it for the flower clock. He was a harness maker himself. He would fiddle with it so long till he got it right. The kids, they still talk about it, the school kids, because he always had such a nice models to show the kids the school.
Mr. Neal moved to the museum and started the museum here in 1950. His models were built of many different things, mainly things that were discarded by other people and going to the dump at that time.
Raymond Scotchmer, present-day curator, has inherited this vast Neal legacy. He describes why and how it was conceived.
Mr. Neal tried to make his models simple, that the children could understand them. I have read in parts of his diary where he got his greatest thrill from seeing the children get enjoyment and learn something from the models that he made. By turning the crank, the horses rotate. In real life or in real perspective, the horses would be doing the turning, and the power would come out through the horsepower here, through the gears, out the shaft, through the knuckle, a long tumbling shaft, and to the piece of machinery that you were operating, such as a threshing machine, a corn cutting box, or a buzzsaw, whatever you wanted to use it for.
The Huron County Pioneer Museum is but one of the markers of the town's colorful past. On the bluff overlooking the Maitland River, this imposing stone structure is a National Historic Site depicting another facet of society's past. Behind these barred windows, one could once find the poor, the aged, and the mentally ill housed alongside notorious criminals such as James Donnelly of the Black Donnelly clan of Lucan. Sounds still echo from the darkened hallways, leaving a chilling reminder to present-day visitors of life in these confines. The old Huron District Jail at Goderich was built here between 1839 and 1842 on 2.5 acres donated by the Canada Land Company. One of the early governors was Joseph P. Griffin, 6 feet 7 inches tall, remembered as a very fair man, noted for his progressive prison reform thinking. The governor and Mrs. Griffin lived on this site until his retirement. That was in December 1923. The walls extend 18 feet in height and go down 5 feet into the ground. To further deter escapes, an additional 3 feet of loose stone was added on top. One of the oldest institutions of its kind, the jail was the site of the last public hanging in Canada. One is forever to be reminded that in a community with seafaring ties, history is sometimes brutally dictated by the forces of Mother Nature. Of the marine tragedies that have struck Goderich, Mac Campbell related the story of one of the most serious.
November the 9th, 1913 was the great storm in which 244 lives were lost on the Great Lakes and 19 ships were stranded and sunk. So that meant that financially there was a great loss to a lot of these companies, and as well great loss of loved ones for many, many families. On Sunday afternoon, November the 9th, the weather just changed very severely again, being that the snow flurries started to come with the heavy winds and the heavy seas. We're talking about seas that could be anywhere from 35 to 45 feet high. And you could hear from the lighthouse point, there were many people here watching that activity, and they could hear the ship blowing danger whistles, and finally they disappeared.
The lost ships left a town in mourning. Its restless neighbor, Lake Huron, had claimed her toll. November 9th, 1913, is forever inscribed in the history of the Port of Goderich. The beacon on Lighthouse Point continues to be a silent witness to the untold saga of the Great Lakes. One cannot appreciate fully the relationship to the Great Lakes until hearing firsthand the experiences associated with marine life. To this day, there are many in Goderich whose affinity to the water is something inherited generation to generation. Down in the harbor, I arranged to meet with Donald Burt McAdam. McAdam, who operates a family business, has spent most of his life on the lakes. As a tugboat captain, he enjoys his role in greeting the many ships that enter the port of Goderich. Going out on a routine run with him gave me the opportunity to learn about his way of life.
Actually, in the early days with sailing ships, with my great-grandfather, but And my grandfather started working around the harbor with small boats and sort of grew into, he had these boats built through the 50s, and I was sort of born and raised around the harbor with him. Usually our general work is helping freighters to turn around to come into the salt dock and into the elevators to either unload grain or load it. This time of year right now they're bringing in Ontario wheat. It's being transported from here to Port McNicoll for export. We come on and we help the boats turn around and up to the elevators or maneuver around in the harbor. In the fall of the year, the saltwater boats start coming in for the corn crops. And they ship it direct overseas. The first thing I really remember is my grandfather taking me aboard the last sailing ship on the Great Lakes. It was called the J.T. Wing.
Really?
And he was a sailor man himself, and nothing to do. I had to go with him and see this boat. And that's the first remembrance of being on a boat that I can remember, is coming aboard the schooner J.T. Wing. It was about 1939. She came in here with a load of lumber for the Beckler lumber yard that used to be in Goderich here. And,
From wooden hull to steel, people like Donald Burt McAdam have had much to share in the experiences of Goderich's past. And finally, if nostalgia was to be considered, the town is probably most importantly remembered in the minds of those from both sides of the Atlantic as the site of the Commonwealth Air Training School. One of Canada's roles in the Second World War was to provide air training for over 300,000 pilots away from the main theaters of war. Sky Harbor Airport on Lake Huron was where pilots quickly and expertly were trained, so that the battles over the skies of Europe could be won. It was from this same airport that I was to depart from Goderich. In taking my leave, I could not help but reflect on how the combination of location and events have given this town a permanent place in our country's heritage.
I'll see the folks up on Main Street who will always take the time for a story over coffee at the old Five and Dime. The flag on our town hall through the years is flowing free, a tribute to our hometown's history. Our town, wherever I may roam, I'll always have a place that I call home. Our town, it's very plain to see, there'll always be a part of you in me. There'll always be a part of you in me. There'll always be a part of you